This combination of a dispersion effect, shepherd filter, and flanger create interesting wide interference patterns.
Today, I will be looking at AU5's Ultracomb effect, or something close. I'll explain how to make it in Bitwig and how I think it works. Through explaining it, maybe I'll understand it better myself.
This is Cinnabar, synthesizing noise, visuals, and knowledge for creators and innovators.
The most important effect in the chain is the disperser. My Bitwig comes with a preset called Disperser, so let's have a look at that. This disperser preset that comes with Bitwig Studio 5.2.1 would be very simple to recreate. It's nothing more than a stack of multi-band EQs with macros controlling the band splits and mix. There's a few things I don't like about this preset though. You can't control the actual level amount of the effect, as this effect macro knob is actually just controlling the mix rather than the strength of the effect. Also, the low, mid and high here seems to just be controlling the level of that section of the frequency spectrum rather than the effect being applied to that part of the spectrum. I can't immediately think of a way to do that better though. This approach does produce that distinctive watery chirp that smears frequencies and time and can be slid around the spectrum to your heart's content. Yep, that's definitely the sound. Next, let's put this together to create the Ultracomb. Add in a test tone and set it to pink noise and off. Add an effects layer, add a layer, add a delay, disabling any filtering, feedback and setting the mix to full, then set it to about 10 milliseconds. Hold Control and copy it to the layer 1. We want to add some macros, but we want to be able to control everything, so we need to add a chain. Go ahead and add everything to the chain. I like to add a test tone because you often end up using this. Next we need to add a macro control for the flanger, which is the effect created by mixing the two layers with a delay. Add a macro and map it to control the delay by about 10 seconds plus or minus. With the plus or minus button selected, you can do a pre or post delay by 10 milliseconds with sub-millisecond accuracy. Let's have a listen. Sounding pretty good, though maybe not as clear as some dedicated flanger effects might be. Now let's add our secret sauce dispersion, or rather the Bitwig preset called Disperser, which remember is just a chain of multi-band EQs, nothing too special. For the preset that we're building, we want to add at least one macro to control one of the controls of the disperser. Collapse things to give yourself some room, then add a macro. Let's map it to the low to mid split, controlling the entire range. Let's give it a listen. That's working. Let's collapse everything and add in a frequency shifter. With disperser disabled, we should get a nice shepherd tone effect. Let's macro the shift control so we can control this in our preset. Now let's turn everything back on and have a listen to the result. You can also create multiple copies of the FX layer to make the effects stronger.
Applied to this is then a shepherd filter effect.
Once you're happy, you can save this off as a preset in Bitwig. To save time, I won't take you through the process of building the Ultracomb again, but let's look at another Bitwig specific way to make a disperser, which I'd argue is the backbone of the Ultracomb. So this time we add in our test tone and an FX grid. Add in the all pass node, and before doing anything else, macro the frequency and the poles. Now the fun part. Make lots and lots of copies of the all pass. In this example here, I created 50. A shout out to Polarity for demonstrating this method. I really like the sound of this one, so I'm going to add this into my library. This should definitely be one of the factory presets, I think. But somehow we're not quite done. There's actually a few more ways we can make a disperser. Melda's free plugin, MFreeformPhase. Right click the phase adjustment and turn off drawing mode. You can see we can sweep through the frequency spectrum and create a transient smearing effect. Another way is using the sawtooth option. I don't pretend to know how this really works, but it seems to be more flexible than some of the other methods we've discussed. Unfortunately, you can't macro any of these phase adjustments other than the depth. But there are still other ways we can create a disperser. Add yourself an effects layer, and to the first layer, add MPhaser, another free Melda plugin. Macro the LFO override such that it can get no lower than -99.9, which below that would be off. Also macro the feedback. Lastly, macro the mode, which is basically the number of phaser bands. Create another layer and control drag the MPhaser into the second layer. Make sure they are both full wet, then set invert feedback polarity for one of these. Add a tool device to one of these and invert the phase of the signal. This is basically the same workflow that AU5 demonstrates in Ableton. I get a pretty powerful and sometimes unpredictable result using this approach. Add the effects layer to another chain and macro the FX layer macros using the chain's modulators. Now we can strengthen this effect by duplicating the FX layer.
It's a dry signal mixed with a wet signal chain starting with a dispersion effect which causes some frequency at a time. Applied to this is a shifted filter effect created from a mix between the dispersed signal and a slightly frequency shifted signal. A delay between the drop.
I think the results from this were really good, so I'm going to add this to my template library. It'd probably be nice to have a dedicated plugin for this, which is gentle on CPU. Enter Kilohertz Disperser plugin. Once again, this was Cinnovator. Let me know what you thought of the video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.